Okay, so Machinal scene. This scene is based on Machinal by Sophie Treadwell. We began to devise our Machinal scene with the ensemble in Charlotte towards the end of November. As we wanted to show Flora's struggle with finding Ben in this scene, we did a little exercise with the cast that we called the resistance game, where they had to stop each other from getting to the back of the room any way they could. We then asked our cast members to think of a typical office movement and then to over-exaggerate and dramatise it. They came up with various typing motions, filing movements, and people answering telephones. The reason that we wanted it to be over-exaggerated and made into these big, sweeping movements was because we wanted to make this quite a comic scene, especially as it opens the play, and most of our scenes are actually quite of a different and bleak nature, and there's not a lot of comic relief within the rest of the play. We then wanted to give the scene a soundscape, and decided to use the cast's voices to create a busy sounding working environment. So we asked them as well, when they spoke, we wanted them to speak in a dumb, almost Essex sounding accent to make it a bit funnier. The first week back from the Christmas holidays, we asked the cast to run the movements over as well as they could remember them. After refreshing ourselves on the movements, we decided that the best way to move forward on the scene was to set the blocking. We all agreed that we wanted Charlotte to walk to each member of the ensemble individually and ask where Ben is. But we didn't want her to simply just walk in a zigzag form to each member, as it didn't seem creative enough. So we decided that the dynamics of the stage should shift around Charlotte. We did a grid walking exercise for this, in which every time Charlotte walked to an ensemble member, they had to move in grid formation individually away from her. I suggested it seemed too messy on stage, so we changed it a bit by getting the ensemble to all turn the same time to face downstage left, to give it a little bit more structure. This is also to symbolise what a struggle it was to get anyone to respond to Flora, as it seemed like she was turning a corner onto a different department of the office to find him, and signified a change in time. I also suggested it because it symbolised the stereotypical chaotic office environment, and we really tried to work to those stereotypes. Pippa wrote a small dialogue for the ensemble, which consisted of the office workers having a coffee break and chatting about pointless things whilst Flora was trying to talk to them. This again was to provide a little bit more comedy, but also a grotesqueness, as they all laughed shrilly at each other's gossip. Once they'd learnt their lines, we had them repeat their one-liners over and over again, getting increasingly louder to mimic office babble, until Flora gets so irritated that she shouts to silence them, asking for Ben, to which one worker replies, "Oh, I know, dear, this way," leading her to the corner of the stage. For the next few rehearsals, we practiced devising a comical, almost slapstick movement sequence for the end of the scene, where the office workers are desperately trying to listen to Flora and Ben's conversation. This involved the stereotype of holding your hand to your ear in order to overhear something, and dragging people away from the door by their ankles, and scrabbling on top of each other to form pyramids. However, during the beginning of April, we had started doing a few run-throughs of all the scenes, and there was something bothering us about this one. Something just didn't quite seem right. I mean, we loved the movements at the beginning, where Flora is trying to find Ben, but the ending seemed too farcical. So we decided to scrap the dialogue during the coffee break, as we wanted the ensemble to stage us as a movement ensemble as much as possible, and believed it would be better if they just talked as little as possible throughout the play. But as we'd taken out that particular element, we felt that we had to take out the end movement, as it was just far too slapstick without it. It just didn't feel like it was in keeping with the style of the play. We definitely knew we'd have to take it out once we had the recorded voice of Ben and Flora's argument to play whilst they did the sequence, because it completely detracted the attention away from the importance of the conversation. And it was so vital that the audience understood that Ben barely ever had time for Flora anymore, in order to see the regression of their once perfect relationship, and the ridiculous clamouring over one one another sort of stole that important piece of information away from the audience. So we took them both out and kept it as it is.